He said, I had federally prosecuted nursing homes for 2 decades. And he said, what you're going through with your mom is not unique to you. It is a systemic crisis. And there is no change. It's been like this for decades. Nothing happens because they get a slap on the hand and that's it. He was retiring this was in 2022. And he said, he knew I was a filmmaker. And he said, if you think about doing a documentary on this, I will throw my hat in the ring. And I was like, okay, this is meant to be. I have to do a documentary on this because I was seeing things that I could not unsee. And everything that happened to my mom, which was way too much for 6 months, was emblematic of what goes on behind these closed doors.
Welcome back to the Dementia Collective. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Susie Singer Carter. Susie, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
Of course, before we get too far in, we have a Patreon where members of the village are able to, support our show and ask the guests a question. One of the guest questions here is, you have said that My Mom and the Girl is about your mother. So how do you navigate the lines between what is, public to talk about versus what is private within your family?
That's a great question because it's actually a topic that's very important to me. And I just wrote an article about it for my Substack. And it's, the ethics of storytelling is very important to me because I think as storytellers, we have a responsibility to tell stories with dignity and for purpose. But you have to be careful how you handle stories, whether it's your own or someone who has entrusted you with their story. And also, what are the ethics of following up with that story? If, for instance, doing a documentary like we just did, No Country for Old People, you're telling something that's very engaging and maybe that brings information to people that they don't know before. How do you follow? Do you follow up with that, or do you go, okay, there it is, bye bye, have fun with all that information? And I don't think that's the case, at least for me. I don't think it's the right ethics. And when you're telling a story, like a personal story, like in My Mom and the Girl, I wanted to do that film because I wanted to shift the way we look at people with Alzheimer's and dementia. And I felt like the story that I was telling, this day in the life of, was so dynamic and so impactful. It wrote itself. Now, I wanted to be truthful and I wanted to be authentic to how the disease presents, but I also wanted to do it, I didn't want to exploit anything with my mom. So I took it to a certain level, to a certain line. And then that was it. And just enough for people to actually understand the difficulties and also the joys that you can experience when you're on an Alzheimer's or a dementia journey. And I wanted to be respectful to my mom. And everybody's, your version or your perspective of what is respectable, what is the difference between that and being exploitive may be different than mine. You might think it's okay to go farther, and I might think that's not correct. Or you might think, oh, she's gone too far. You have to use your own instinct on that and also vet it with other people before you go out, because it's important when you're telling stories that are impactful to be truthful, but they don't have to be, exploitive. I really don't like that. And I've seen it a lot, and I don't think it's necessary. I think it's clickbait, for lack of a better word, even though we're not talking about the internet. But to me, that's kind of like the easy, the easy eyeball draw. And I don't, I just feel like there's enough like bias against, people with disabilities. And that includes people with Alzheimer's and dementia, Parkinson's, anything else. Why do we want to add to that? We want to try to diffuse that and show the truth, but don't escalate it. So is that does that
I
give you a
think
good
so. And
answer?
in the short, it specifically referenced that your mom has two children, a brother or a son and a daughter. Is that the true dynamics? You have a brother as well?
Huh? Everything in it is true.
Okay, that was what Aquarius. So how involved was your brother then in validating or saying, you know what, this is what Susie thinks is the line, but the brother might have a different line. How was that journey? Because I know
That
often hear
journey,
from caregivers that, I'm okay with this, but they're okay with this other thing. So you're constantly having to adapt what you can and can't say.
understood. Well, in my case, it was very easy and clear because my brother was not involved in my mom's caregiving at all. So he took a back seat in terms of that. And he just I didn't really run it by him. It wasn't part of the equation because he wasn't part of it. And actually the care, sometimes this happens very often. I mean, as you know, I have a podcast as well called Love Conquers Alls. And we talk about this a lot, that caregiving can either make a family stronger or it can break them.
100%.
And so it broke my relationship with my brother. And it's tragic, but it did. It did. So in terms of my family, I didn't have to worry about that because I just have one sibling. But, if you want to take it into the realm of my documentary, I was very cognizant because I'm telling a personal story that also involved my children and friends and things like that. So who were witness. And so I was very careful and very respectful of their feelings. Is this okay to show this? Would you feel okay that, like my nephew, I had a beautiful storyline with him and my mom, who were very close. He preferred not to be a part of it, and that was fine. So, that as a filmmaker, that's what you do. You have to respect people's their privacy and their boundaries.
Hmm.
But,
And it was interesting because in the film we see the actress who portrays your daughter, and your mom wasn't able to recognize her, and you kind of just didn't rub it in their face like this is your granddaughter. You just kind of moved past it and so eloquently navigated that dynamic with her. So I thought
thank you.
that was really interesting. So how did you decide what day would be? Because your mother lived with you for a while, so there was many days. What made it
Yeah.
obviously that day? The story you're saying is true. So it was an eventful day. But how do you decide on that day versus a typical
Yeah.
Tuesday or something?
Well, for me, it was like I didn't have any plan in mind to do a short film on my mom at all. And Erlonda, if you watch the film, our caregiver, who was part of our family for years and years, because she was my daughter's nanny, and then she was my mom's housekeeper, and they became really close. And she was just part of the family. And every day, because she moved in with us, because I had just gone through a divorce, and she'd come back and regale me with all these like and crazy fun things that happened with my mom, because my mom is a pistol, right? So, I mean, like one of the afternoons, they were missing for 3 hours. I'm like, where are they? Because Orlando doesn't drive. So they're walking all over the place I lived at the time in Universal City, like, right in, like in Hollywood. And I get a hold of her, and they're at Starbucks hanging out with Snoop Dogg because my mom is singing, and she's like just digging out. They're just having an afternoon, and Snoop is like, "Little mom, I'm taking you on the road," because my mom was a singer, and they're just jiving. I'm like, okay, I just like, should I pick you up? Like, what is going on? So I mean, I actually that's another pivot. But I after the film was released, people were like, "This is not long enough. We want to know what happened." And I was going to like write the full feature film on it and bring in the whole storyline with Snoop, but that would have been a bit fictionalized, with my expertise of like knowing the journey and what happens with people, who are living with Alzheimer's. But it didn't manifest. But so getting back to your question, why that day? When Nerlanda came back and told me this story, it touched me deeply. And that if you haven't seen it, it's, I'll try to say briefly, it's really about this meeting of three disparate women, my mom, her caregiver, and a transgender woman, at 10 p.m. on the street corner in East Los Angeles. And they have a meeting that is so beautiful and so profound. And the three of them have such a dynamic, like innate understanding and manage to alleviate pain between the three of them in such an, elegant way and such a warm and heartfelt way that it was like, you can't write this. Like, this is so beautiful. But I would tell people when people would ask me, my friends were like, what's going on? How's your mom? And I'd tell them the story. And they'd go, you have to do a film about this. This is too beautiful. And I was like, just what the world needs is another film on Alzheimer's, right? And then I thought about it more and more, and I thought, well, this actually talks to a lot of different subjects. It talks to diversity. It talks to our biases, and, you know, racism. Here we've got Orlando, who's from Guatemala, and yet here's my mom, this upscale Jewish woman from, wearing her Dooney and Burke bag. And she's like, you're my best friend. Like, when would they ever be best friends? But they were best friends because it took all the filters away and any judgment or anything that you would have, and that's why my mom could look at, this Harmony is the actress's name, who's actually a transgender woman. And she was like, look at her and just go, and that is my mom. To say, I can see my mom saying that. What are you talking about? If you looked in the mirror, you're gorgeous. Now you stop that. She turned into mommy. And she made her think. She's like, you are, if no one doesn't love you, they're jealous. Let me tell you, and like that, she went into mommy mode, and that changed her perspective, that woman. And there they are, the three, like, like the weirdest combination of women walking across the street together, arm in arm. How beautiful is that, right? It's just I just loved it. I just thought it was powerful in a lot of ways.
There was one scene in particular, actually two scenes, one back to back, that I thought were really powerful within the short. Firstly was when your mom was having dinner with the nanny's family. Then she's not really totally lucid, it seems. And then the music comes on. I can't remember what mariachi song it is, but it's super common. And then like it clicks and she is in and she's engaged and she is celebrating. And it was interesting to see how music impacted her. I know it specifically, as the narrator, you mentioned it in there that the music really moved her. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, music, my mom was a professional singer and, was singing since she was 6 years old and singing opera at 9 in New York. And, that was her language. And so that is her cognitive reserve. If you ever talk about that on your podcast, when everybody has a cognitive reserve that is their, you know, it stays for almost ever. I mean, my mom, if I brought music into her room or when we were together, that was the key to opening up everything. So music is very powerful for everybody, but for my mom in particular. So what was beautiful about that moment is that, Erlanda and her husband, Louis, they knew that music would be a redirect. And they knew that, and they knew it instinctively. And they were just incredible human beings. And so you could see the magic of it, how it just, she's getting agitated. She's starting to have memories, but they're not clicking. She knows this was her table. She knows, like, what are you doing? The paranoia that comes in at that stage of Alzheimer's, where it's like, oh yeah, she thinks that she went and stole her table. She can't put it all together. The memory is fragmented. So redirecting with music is such a great tool and so powerful. And it just eliminates the anxiety.
What I thought was especially well done in that scene is you go from this high of the music, the celebration, to this immediate low of discomfort. There was tension. I mean, the music itself was unsettling as like, what's going on? Why am I here? What's happening? that she goes and looks through the cabinet of stuff. It's this interesting tension. I think it portrays this real life dynamic that someone with dementia kind of goes through, right? You have this high, there is a level of lucidity, and then really quickly it just flips and they don't have that. You have to try and navigate those pieces.
It's yeah, the confusion. And I think the stage that my mom was at is such that I'm showing at that time period was such a difficult stage for her, for anyone going through Alzheimer's. And I always say like she was straddling the fence at that point, because when she was lucid, she was mom. She was her. She was as she always was. And I could say to her, "Mom, you have Alzheimer's." "Yeah, I know, and she was aware of it. And then and then on the other side, she was, fighting, like, because she could feel herself losing it. She could feel, we all do. Like, if you forget a word, don't you ever panic sometimes when you forget a word, or you're like, right? And you're like, and that panic exasperates everything. It like makes it even bigger. And so I could see my mom starting to panic. And then then the dignity sets in, which at some stage they don't have that dignity anymore. They don't worry about it, those social pretenses. So, but at some point, but for a very long time they do. So that dignity steps in, and it's like, well, there's nothing wrong with me. It's you, all of you. It's you, because I'm fine. Because they're trying to hold on to who they were, and that is so hard. That is so sad and hard at the same time. And that's why it's so important to lean in. That's why I wanted to show that I made every mistake in the book until I learned to lean into where she was, so I could make her feel okay about this journey, and that it's okay. It's okay if she doesn't remember. Who cares? Like, memories are so overrated. Who cares? Like, it actually, it's the epitome of being a Zen, is to live in the moment. And that is the great lesson that you can learn from somebody with dementia, is that living in the moment is all they have. So that's what's important. And I think that's a great lesson. So, but yeah, that scene was very difficult for her, because she loved her Londa, but now suddenly she's in this place that she can't remember where she is and why, and nothing seems familiar. And can you imagine if that happened to you, how would you feel?
Totally. Totally. It's
Yeah.
an uncomfortable thing. And I think a lot of caregivers, especially early on, they may say that they understand it, but in reality, you can't wrap your head around it unless you've either witnessed it enough or been through it.
Yeah. And I do think, though, we all have the ability to have that empathy. I'm not talking about compassion, but empathy, to be able to put yourself in those shoes and say, well, like I just said to you, like, what would it feel like if suddenly you were sound asleep and you wake up and you're in a different room, a house, a place you don't know, you don't recognize the people, you're panicking, right? So it's like that fright flight thing. And that's why so many people with Alzheimer's, they want to go home. They want to leave. They're trying to find something familiar that is comforting. And so all those things, I tried to put into this little film, to help caregivers to understand, as the best that I could explain it, what was going on in this journey, which is a really difficult journey. It's not easy for anybody, but there is so much joy to find in it. And there are so many gifts. And I wanted to show that.
Amazing. Susie, well, I think it's probably time to introduce you to the folks. I haven't done that yet. So I'm going to read
Okay.
your bio now for everyone. All right.
Yeah.
So Susie Singer Carter is a multi-award winning writer, director, producer, actor, and caregiver advocate whose work often blends storytelling with social impact. She wrote, directed, and produced the 2018 Oscar qualified short, My Mom and the Girl, starring Valerie Harper, drawing from her personal caregiving experience to shine a heartfelt and uplifting light on loving someone with Alzheimer's. Her feature credits include writing and producing Bratz, the movie, co-producing Soul Surfer, and her latest screenplay, Run, a dramedy featuring Philippa Soo, which releases later this year. Susie wrote, directed, and produced the three-part docuseries No Country for Old People. a nursing home expose, now streaming on Prime Video, Tubi, and Hoopla. And after her mother suffered neglect in a highly rated facility, Susie felt compelled to expose systematic failures in long-term care and spark reform through storytelling. The series received the Gold Anthem Award for Health Awareness in Film and Video. And in response to overwhelming audience reaction to the film, Susie founded ROAR for LTC, a nonprofit movement dedicated to respect, oversight, advocacy, and reform in long-term care. Through film, media, and grassroots engagements, ROAR works to expose systematic failures and advocate for dignity, accountability for older adults and vulnerable residents. ROAR has launched a new National Long-Term Care Reform Day that will be observed annually on September 27th and is currently organizing ROAR 2026, the first national walk for long-term care awareness to commemorate the day. She is the creator and host of the award-winning podcast, Love Talk Girls, named Best Podcast by the New Media Film Festival, and Best Dementia Podcast by Good Pods. A passionate advocate, Susie has emceed the San Fernando Valley Walk to End Alzheimer's and proudly carried a purple flower in honor of her late mother. She also serves as the host of the Writers Guild of America, West's Third, and Fairfax podcast. Susie, you do a lot of things.
Tired.
I believe it. But you're obviously making a massive impact. So thank you for what you're doing. First off,
thank you. Appreciate that. I hope so. Trying.
That's all we can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I think is interesting, it was a foundation, as I understand, for No Country for Old People. You talk about your mom's navigation of a highly rated care facility. Can you talk about your experience in that and what happened on the onset?
Yeah. So, the last 6 months of my mom's life in 2022, which was towards the end, we still had the second surge of COVID. And, I campaigned to get my mom in this facility. She was running out of money. She had Alzheimer's for 16 years. And and so it can be a very long disease. And so when she needed to go into skilled nursing, there are, very few highly rated places that would take somebody on Medicaid in California, Medi-Cal. So, I went in and I said, I'll entertain, I'll play piano, we'll sing, whatever. Anyway, so I got her in and I was so excited. I thought I did the best thing in the world. And then, cut to COVID where we are restricted. We can't, we are isolating our loved ones. We're not allowed to go in there, and in our specific facility, there was no, like, even a window visit. So, when they finally started setting up Zoom calls once a week, and my mom was in a wheelchair. That's a whole nother story. That's for another podcast. But she was totally happy and, communicative and, healthy, except for her, progressive disease, but healthy. Every week that I saw her, which our standing appointment was at 3 p.m. in the afternoon on a Wednesday, my mom was getting uh, like she was drifting away, like every week. And I see her in bed, not outside, not in her chair, in bed at 3 p.m., and not dressed, clearly not, not taken care of. Her hair is a mess and she doesn't look clean. And I'm saying to the CNA who's helping facilitate the Zoom, what is going on? Because we became close, and she goes, I don't know, Susie. It's crazy here. It's crazy. And I could see my mom was not healthy, not doing well. And then, it turned into just hell. My mom was admitted to the hospital with a stage 4 pressure sore. I didn't even know what a pressure sore was, to be honest. I didn't.
It's is it bed sore?
Bed sore, yeah.
Okay.
I got a call at 4 a.m. that they're sending my mom to the hospital because she's having trouble breathing. Okay. When she arrives there, and I can't go there because it's COVID, can't get in. The head nurse calls me and says, your mom's been admitted with, sepsis, pneumonia, 10% kidney function, and a stage 4 bed sore. And I'm like, what? And the reason why she told me is because nobody wants to take responsibility for it, because now I know that bed sores are the hallmark of neglect and abuse. They should never happen. They're regulated by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, CMS. They have regulations for what's called never events. This is a never event. It should not happen. So when I called her facility and I said, my mom was admitted with a stage 4 bed sore, and why wasn't I alerted? It didn't happen here, they said. Didn't happen here. So it happens, happened from there in the ambulance. I guess that's what they're
In
trying
the
to.
whatever less than an hour trip, she
Yeah.
somehow acquired bed sores that were days in the making.
Yeah, easily weeks. So, that started this whole horrible journey with my mom. My mom, you know, eh, I just learned so much. Everything I tried to do to help my mom was not helping. They wouldn't, when she was released from the hospital, she was released with a feeding tube. She didn't need a feeding tube. She was released with a Foley catheter. She didn't need a Foley catheter. They put her on NPO, which means nothing by mouth. And they said, oh, well, your mom's aspirating and she can get aspiration pneumonia. And I said, well, first of all, she already had pneumonia. You guys did not take care of her. So she had pneumonia because she got sepsis, and sepsis turns into pneumonia most of the time. And that was from the bed sore. And I said, my mom lives to eat. This is her joy. She is not aspirating. And if you need to get somebody in here to tell you that she's not aspirating, then do it. I said it nicer than that, by the way, because at that time I didn't know what it was. I didn't know you needed to get an evaluation, but I was like, because I was giving her, smoothies and she was fine. She wasn't choking or not, and I said, she doesn't need a feeding tube, and all the, and things just weren't making sense to me. And so cut to about a month later, as this is all, everything's going crazy. And my mom is like, they tried to overdose her with fentanyl in an emergency hospital. Now my mom is bouncing from hospital to hospital because that's what happens. This is not unique. They start bouncing them because they don't want to take responsibility for it. It becomes a drain on the resources, right? So they're like, well, this is happening. Let's send her to emergency. Emergency like gets them at a base and then goes, well, she's done. We don't need to do, she's not, in a crisis. And then the nursing home will say, well, we don't want to take her back now because we don't have, the right kind of help for her. So they'll send them to rehab, which is a whole nother nightmare. So I had just finished watching this miniseries called Dope Sick on
Mhm.
Hulu. Did you see it?
I haven't seen it. I know it is though.
Okay, so it's basically the story of the two federal investigators who go after Purdue Pharma for OxyContin, the manufacturer, Sackler family who manufactured OxyContin and started this whole horrible crisis with opioids. And so the head prosecutor was played by Peter Sarsgaard. Michael Keaton plays the doctor. And on the last episode, the federal prosecutor, Rick Mountcastle, they talk about their next case and they say, oh, our next case is going to be another pharmaceutical, and it's against Abbott Labs, who have off-marketed Depakote to nursing homes to chemically restrain their residents. And so Depakote is actually a anti-seizure drug for people with epilepsy. And it's actually a black label drug for people who have dementia and are elderly. So black label meaning it can kill you. It's not appropriate for someone with those,
Mhm.
acuities. So I was like, I need to get this, because this is what happened to my mom, by the way. This is why she's in a wheelchair, because going to the doctor one day, they took her to the doctor for a checkup and she got agitated. They put her into, a hold, like a mental hold for 72 hours, and put her on Depakote and never took her off. So when she went back to the facility, she no longer could walk. She no longer was continent. She was like a zombie. And I thought that her Alzheimer's had progressed, but no, it was Depakote. Her doctor told me 3 months later, her regular GP said, your mom is on this drug called Depakote. This is blah, 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 what I just explained to you. Do you want me to take her off of it? And I said, yeah, I didn't even know she was on it. I thought she was dying.
Why were you not? Because you likely would have been her
I
caregiver
was.
or her power of attorney, whatever the word is. So how were you not involved in those discussions?
That's a good question. That's a good question because it happens a lot. These
Who would
things
have been
happen.
involved in those discussions?
It would have been when she was admitted I didn't even know, it took them a day to find me, to let me know that she was admitted into this psychiatric hold. And without even looking at her records to say, oh, this woman has Alzheimer's. She's probably having agitation. She's not a psychiatric patient. So what happened was when she was released back to her facility, this was a different facility, a memory care. They probably thought, oh, this is easier. Let's just keep her on Depakote. And so nobody told me. So I had Rick Montcastle come in as a guest on my podcast. And Rick, they won. It was his biggest case. The judgment was a $1.5 billion judgment against Abbott Labs. And Abbott Labs is still in business. If that tells you, A, how much money they make, and B, how strong the pharmaceutical lobby is. Okay. So he also, off the air, he said, I was telling him what was going on with my mom. And he said, I had federally prosecuted nursing homes for 2 decades. And he said, what you're going through with your mom is not unique to you. It is a systemic crisis. Because even though I prosecuted these nursing homes, there is no change. It's been like this for decades. Nothing happens because they get a slap on the hand and that's it. Rick Montcastle he was retiring this was in 2022. And he said, he knew I was a filmmaker. And he said, if you think about doing a documentary on this, I will throw my hat in the ring. And I was like, okay, this is meant to be. I have to do a documentary on this because I was seeing things that I could not unsee. And everything that happened to my mom, which was way too much for 6 months, was emblematic of what goes on behind these closed doors. And that most people in the collective don't know because we have compartmentalized old, we put it away nice and neat. And we are grateful that there's places to, that will take care of them. But in fact, they're not. In fact, the system's been gamed. And in fact, there's corporate, interest in these facilities, and they make billions of dollars off of people that are not looked at as people. I didn't know this. So I'm Pollyanna. I'm like trying to navigate, like my mom has a stage 4 wound. Are you going to call, the nurse says we need an expert, a wound expert. No, your mom's fine. Your mom is dying. So we're just going to keep her comfortable. I'm like, what do you mean she's dying? She wasn't dying 2 weeks ago. Like, why do you mean she's dying? She has a wound that you need to take care of. You and I would die if we had that wound and didn't have it taken care of. Yeah, she's dying if you don't take care of her. I know if my mom was dying. I know my mom, and I'm not in any kind of, I'm not under, illusions that my mother's not going to pass away at some point. I know she's not ready to pass away now. And I could feel them pushing me to just let her go. Let her go. And I said, she's not ready to die. I will know that. We're very close. We have a close relationship. I have been her caregiver. I look in her eyes, and if my mom looked at me and she was ready, she'd be like, leave me alone. I'm ready.
And the doctors weren't pushing back and saying, this is dumb. We need to put her well-being first over this nonsense?
No. In fact, when she went back in, she was into the hospital 6 times before she passed away. The 4th time she went in, they had her on MPO, as I told you, which is nothing by mouth. And I said, "Can you please take that order off? And can't you enforce them as her doctor releasing her from the hospital?" He said, "Yes, I will do that." They said, "We're not going to do it. We're not going to feed her. So if you want to feed her, take her home." And I realize it's like there's nothing you can do because there is no enforcement. There's no oversight. There's no transparency. And
So let me get this back up. So you're saying that the physicians said they needed to do the specific intervention, and the long-term care facility said, "Yeah, no thanks, we're not going to do it."
we're not going to do it. Why weren't they going to do it? Because the business model, and this is across our country. This is not just my mom's facility. This is everybody, unless for the rare, family owned that really care. And there are a few, and there's a couple gems out there, but it's not the norm. The business model is based on understaffing because staffing is your biggest cost. And so they chronically understaff, and they, they count on, turnover, which is the opposite in most businesses. They don't care. The cheaper they can pay their help, the better. As long as there's a few bodies in there, they're fine. They think it's fine. Now what's happening is your frontline providers are being abused as well. So they can't do a good job because they're, instead of taking care of maybe 10 to 12 residents, which would be a lot, they're taking care of 20 to 30 residents, maybe 40 in a day. How much time can they dedicate to them? Not much. Not much at all. So who wants that job? The people that really care, that are vocational caregivers like CNAs and registered nurses, they go home with moral injury because they know that they're doing a disservice. They can't do the service that they should be doing. It's such a terrible situation that I can only say it's like warehousing human beings.
What's crazy, Susie, is when you're talking, I think about this as a spectrum. So we have under regulation on this side that's saying um, it's kind of a Wild West. These people can do what they want. They're trying to owner operator idea where I'll do what I want because I make as much money as possible. We have that on this side. And on the other side, we have of the spectrum, we have over regulation. So in Ontario right now, they just passed a law almost 6 months ago, maybe, that says that if there is any of these instances, like you mentioned, even to much lesser extent, uh, they have no choice, but the province or provincial health body will sue the directors, management, executives, every single person. So they are acutely aware of any problem and actively trying to mitigate it to the effect where a woman living with dementia probably 2 months ago now, 3 months ago, she had a non-lucid moment and she hit her husband of whatever 65, 70 years, and they were forced to call the police. The police were forced, because it was intimate partner violence, to arrest her, put her in handcuffs, put her in the back of a cop car. This woman's like 96. Put her in the back of the cop car, take her to the police station, fingerprint her, and charge her with intimate partner violence. And because the system in this long-term care facility, as regulated by the government, is over-regulating and saying, we want to prevent all these problems. Now we're going to go extra hard on this side to prevent that. So now we have further problems here where we're now criminalizing someone who had a non-lucid moment that their intent was not there. They don't even remember doing it.
Right. Yeah, that's a mess. That's a mess right there. And I know in Canada, because I have a lot of friends who are advocates as well there that I've met through my community now, that there's a lot of the same thing of ejecting people from, if they're become too uh impactful on the resources, or they're too difficult to take care of. They'll just say, you know what, we're going to have to you know, your mom's going to have to move. And there's nothing, it's really, it represents the ageism. It reflects the ageism in our society because so many people, even colleagues of mine, will say, well, your mom lived till, she was 89. It's like, yeah, that's okay. Jane Fonda's 88 and she's a pistol. Like, why? I mean, who are we to like put a judgment on a number? As someone's in their life, it's their life. But we've very easily adopted that perspective that it's, "Oh, well, it's okay. It's okay." And it's not okay because when you're there and you're of that age, how are you going to feel? How does that feel to be completely devalued, to have no dignity, to be told to wet your bed because they don't have time to take you to the restroom? Just go in your bed. We'll be there in a minute. I mean, what quality of life are we talking about here? What are we doing? So if we're keeping people alive and having them, defecate and urinate in their beds because we don't have enough time to take them to the restroom, why are we doing that? Why are we even housing them? Why are we pretending to be a home?
What's interesting is we had James Lee on an earlier episode of the show. Are you familiar with James Lee?
I'm not. Mm-mm.
So James Lee, he's out of San Antonio. He co-founded Bella Groves, which is a dementia care community. And when they were founding Bella Groves, he had a couple co-founders that were real estate guys. And as he was starting this process, he was talking about the idea that everyone in this care is basing these dementia care, memory care facilities on a real estate model, real estate economic model
That's
of,
right.
butts and seats sort of an idea. In
Sure.
order to move forward, we have to maximize certain profit margins, but none of it is considering the need for care. How do we actually care for those people? Because really it should be a service-based model as opposed to real estate, but it's predicated on real estate valuation and value
Right.
propositions and
It's
stuff.
economically driven. It's economically driven. They most of them are 75% or more
I would say
are.
more.
Yeah. And if you watch our documentary, we are very thorough and we talk, we pull the curtain back on everything. I mean, our experts lay it on the line. It's like it's criminal enterprise. It's basically in our country, the corporations are shielded. They're protected. So you can't. So if there is neglect and abuse, and it's coming from the top because they have made it that you can't get any better treatment. That's the treatment you're going to get and it's not vindictive. It doesn't come from, sure, there's these rogue bad people. There are bad people that do rogue things and bad things because they're just bad. That has nothing to do with neglected abuse in the system. Those are different kinds of, situations. And those often get, again, you were talking about exploiting. People will exploit those things. And what it does is it's a good distraction of what's really happening. Those are just bad players that, certain individuals that harm people, elderly, vulnerable people. Most of the harm comes from these corporations that have related party companies, like the management company, like the vendors, the service, the cleaning, all those things they own, and then they jack up the prices because they're paying themselves. So then they go to CMS and they say, "Oh, we can't afford staffing at that level. We can't afford, minimum staffing that you're telling us to do. So you have to give us more money or we just can't do it." But then even if they get more money, it doesn't go to staffing, it goes to their pockets. And that's what the business model is based on. So when 200,000, I'm going to give you this is such a staggering piece of data that in the first year of COVID, over 200,000 nursing home residents and frontline providers died, not from COVID,
Wow.
from isolation. Why isolation? Because you had frontline providers, you had staff that was getting sick, so they couldn't come in. They had to be quarantined for 2 weeks. Who's taking care of these people? So I mean, I know from my own experience, I would get calls, you get these like recorded calls every single day, you know, there's 20, 12 staff members have been sent home and quarantined for 2 weeks. They tested positive. Every day you're like, well, who's taking care of the residents? So they're in their rooms, isolated to keep everybody safe. They're basically, isolated to death. And that's what happened. They died from failure to thrive. Alone.
So, Susie, what impact have you seen now that the documentary has been launched for a while? What impact are we seeing?
Well, I think in my little bubble so far, and I'm trying obviously with the walk that we're doing, trying to get out of the bubble, outside of it. And I think that we're even changing perspectives in our bubble, because even in our bubble of caregiver, of advocates and, uh, voices who are trying to amplify this situation that's been going on for decades, there was misunderstandings within our community. And I feel good that at first I would get the response like, you're telling too much, or you've gone too far, is the response we get. You've gone too far, Susie. And I'd say, how am I going too far? I'm telling the truth. I can't unsee what I saw. So, and thank God for my partner, Rick Montcastle, who had been up against you going too far so many times in his career as a federal prosecutor. And he just said, stay the course. You have to be tough. You have to be tough. You know what the truth is. The truth will, it will come, it will rise to the top. It always does. And I'm just noticing now, and it's been a little over 6 months since we launched our documentary, that within our community, I'm getting people circling back and saying, you really did a good job. I stand corrected. They appreciate what we brought to the table. And that's a huge win, because we need everybody to agree that this is why there's a problem. So I see that. I get letters and emails and, messages, DMs every single day. I just watched your documentary. Thank you. Thank you. I was crying and celebrating through the whole thing, because I realized my story is not unique. Like they didn't want to think they were crazy, like this is the way it should be, and that's the way it is. And so that is that puts wind in your sail. That just tells you, okay, there's a reason why I'm doing this. It's not easy. It's not easy to shift a perspective, and especially a whole population, a whole collective's perspective. And that's my lofty goal, is to do that.
Do you think that the impact is being felt more by the caregivers because now they're more acutely aware of the potential problems, how it's being spun or talked about, what to be aware of? Or
I
do
hope
you
so.
think that there is a piece inside of it where these long-term care facilities are now hearing this is now exposed, we need to rethink this, or maybe we weren't trying to do that, maybe we were trying to do our best, but we obviously dropped the ball, so now we have our feet to fire, we need to deal with it, and then maybe they're dealing with it. Like, what is the dynamic, do you think, that way?
I wish that it was the latter that you said about the facilities. Some facilities, and this is not the norm, but there are some facilities that figure out how to work within the system that is there now, and they do the best job that they can do. And they're also canny because they understand the business model, and the thing is that unfortunately, the people that are working in the facilities that are bound by these corporate structures, they're doing their job. They're working within the parameters that have been laid out for them, and they don't have a choice. If they can't hire the amount of people that they want to as directors of this facility, they're not given the budget to do it. So they are trying to manage what they can with what they've got. And many of them feel if I leave, who's going to come in and take my place that won't really give two hoots? That's just a job. It becomes just a job. So, you know, I I think that it's I feel like it's almost impossible to expect better care under the system we're in. The people that are giving the best care are doing the best they can. And most of them are good people and good, they leave their job with moral injury. That's why so many people can't go back to their job, because they're not able to do what they know that they're supposed to do. It's too painful. And then what happens is you get people that are just taking it as a, a side gig, like just like, oh, I'm doing this kind of like a temp, they're getting minimal training. They're not vested in it because it's not a high paying job, and it's a hard job. They're not paid enough. And when you're starting out, when you have high turnover, which is another thing that they're basing their business model on, which most companies don't want high turnover because onboarding is expensive. They bank on it because it's cheaper to pay new employees. So that doesn't work well in a healthcare situation. It just doesn't. So you have people that are doing jobs that they're not properly educated for, and also don't have the right um, perspective, don't have the right affinity towards the job. So and when you're working with people, it's not like working in a store. You're not working with get widgets and merchandise. You're dealing with human beings. You can't treat it the same, even though they try. So what I hope is that the people that are running the facilities that are really difficult to run go, aha, so this is why we don't have enough money. Aha, this is what we're up against. So it's going to take the collective voice, the public pressure to say, we know what's going on now. This can't work. So that's what my hope is. That's why we're doing this walk. And that's why the documentary was so important. And the nursing industry has supported us so much. Nurses.org did an amazing review on our documentary. It's mandatory watching. They recommended it as mandatory watching for all nurses. One of the biggest advocacy groups, which is all attorneys, it's the California Attorneys for Long-Term Care Reform, CANR, in San Francisco. They've made our documentary mandatory watching for all new hires. That's amazing. So we're getting into the system and, saying, look over here, this is what's happening, because it can work.
Hmm.
It can work when people aren't taking advantage of it. So that's what I'm hoping that happens. Is it happening? I believe it's happening. There's a ripple effect. I mean, I have nurses, and the CNA organization here has supported us wholly. Like, they're behind us 100%. They are so disrespected and not appreciated. And they are the touchstone to our loved ones. They are so important. So I'm hoping, a shift and then the ripple.
So, Susie, we went from uh, the short film, then over here you have the documentary, and in the middle you started Love Conquers Alls, right? So this is kind of the spectrum. You went short podcast to the documentary, right? So can you talk about uh, the podcast? How did that come about?
So the podcast came out of such a positive, for me, it was a positive goal, because my short film was such a, that's what to talk about, mitigating the stigma that is out there about Alzheimer's and dementia. And there is such a big stigma, even in the healthcare, system. I didn't realize it until I was caregiving for my mom, on a much more hands-on, when she was going in and out of hospitals. And I'm realizing, like, the doctors don't know anything for the most part about dementia. They they have very little patience for it, to the point where they're like, when I tried to call and do a FaceTime with my mom in the hospital because I couldn't go in, and they were like, "Honey, she doesn't talk." And I'm like, "She has Alzheimer's. She can see, she can hear. She needs to know that I'm there." And but they don't understand, and they're not taught it. And it's so important. If we're going to keep people alive longer, we better keep them alive better. And so people need to understand that, just, and gerontology is like, it's that practice has lost so many doctors, and people are just not signing up for it. So it's a problem. So hopefully we can, I don't know, it's all lofty, and I don't feel negative about the impact. Oh, wait, I'm going up to key. Let me go back to, you asked me about how did I get to the podcast? Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. So the podcast came out of this really lovely short film that was very positively received because there was nothing particularly, scary about it. I told the truth, but I also told the truth of the good parts too, the funny parts, the sweet parts, the, tender parts, all the parts. And people started talking about it more. And I got, again, letters, like gorgeous letters from people, like handwritten letters. I just saw this is like, this film blew my mind. Like, that's my grandma. That's my sister. That's my wife. That's my husband. Thank you. Thank you. You told the true story. And I thought, I want to keep this conversation going. How do I do that? And that's when I started the podcast in 2020. And so I wanted to that's why I call it Love Conquers Alls, because we can't, we can't cure it yet, but we can make it a better journey.
Wow. And what impact have you seen then from the podcast? Because you said 2020 you started, right?
I started in
So
2020.
6 years
Out
in.
of the out of the gate. I can't believe it's 6 years. That was when COVID started in March. I started it in March of 21. I started it at last week in December 2020. And right. And so by the time we got our speed up, we were in COVID. We won Best Podcast 2020 at New Media Film Festival, which blew my mind. I was like, what? Like, how did that happen? And so, of course I was like, oh no, I'm in it. I am like, like, I guess we're doing a good job. What I noticed was, because there wasn't a lot of podcasts about dementia or Alzheimer's. Otherwise I would have been listening to them at the time. There was a handful of us, and now there's so many. So what I see, the change is that there is a shift. People are starting to realize this is an important conversation. There's a lot of, choices out there to, listen to and get resources for your particular or the stage that you're at. We just started our 12th season. So we do 20 shows a season, and we just started our 12th season. So that's like incredible. And so we have a library of such, amazing, amazing information, and like wonderful interviews, and doctors and scientists and people, like Greg O'Brien, who's lived with Alzheimer's and was still doing journalism, and reporting, and I don't know if you know who he is, but just amazing people that are just, wrote a book while he has Alzheimer's. So he really talked about going through that experience, the virtual experience. Just read his book, you'll go through it. It's amazing. So anyway, yeah, that was my impetus, and I don't ever want to. I don't think I want to stop. Like, I just think it's so important to have as much to talk about it as much as we can until it's completely normal,
Hmm.
or we
So
cure it.
hopefully it happens sooner rather than
Yeah,
later. I would say I would love to have that happen and get me out of a job. That would be swell. Love
right.
it.
That's funny about that you said that. That's what all of my experts on No Country for Old People would say. Please, like the lawyers and, all of them, they go, please put us out of business. Please. Like they'd be happy to be out of business. And I know that's true. They're not lying. So yeah. Yeah.
So, Susie, you live in LA and you live and breathe Hollywood adjacent things and Hollywood related things. How have you seen stigma change over time, or has it changed?
I do think it's changed. Like, there's an organization here called HHS, which is the Hollywood Health Society, which is very involved with one of the unions that I belong to, which is the Writers Guild of America, and they really oversee um, health issues and how they're incorporated, and make sure that they are incorporated into storyline. So, and they make sure that it's authentic, and they keep oversight on those stories. And it's really great because, like, if you watch The Pit,
Yeah.
they're very hands on with the pit. So
Is it a
you will know
mandate that they have to get checked by these guys, or is it an elective thing?
it's not a mandate, but they have enough power to go in and say, we want to question, your storylines, or we'd like to suggest some storylines. They will be there on the set and, make sure that everything is authentic, because they don't want to create more stigma. So, like, if and I'll just use The Pit as an example because it's very popular right now, but in the first season they had quite a bit of diverse stories, and one in particular was a brother and a sister whose father was at the end of his dementia, and the sister just didn't, like, the hospital was saying, we need to just keep him comfortable, and she was saying no, and the brother was leaning into that because they had a full code, and she just could not let go. And so it was that dilemma that we often go through, in families, about when you're caregiving. It's like two different philosophies, like, and how do you come to terms with it? How do you meet in the middle on a huge decision like that? Those are important conversations. And when, story, I have on my Substack, I talk about story as power, and the power of story and ethics of story, all those kinds of things, that because story is so important in how we present. And also, to your point, I remember watching, like, Alice, which was about it was a mainstream film, Alec Baldwin, and blanking on the woman. She's like the one actress I always forget her name, with the red hair. She's really great, and I can't think of her name. It doesn't matter. You all know the movie. And I had a problem with that movie, and I don't care. I'll say it out loud all the time. I felt like it wasn't true to the pathology. It didn't track with the pathology of Alzheimer's. And
Julianne Moore?
Julianne Moore. Thank
There
you.
we go.
Thank you. Always never can remember her name. Okay. So it was a great movie. It was well acted and well directed, all that, but I felt like they sugarcoated it, and was misleading. And the fact that, she would write herself notes. Well, most people know, if someone at a certain stage in Alzheimer's, you could write yourself a note. You're not going to remember that you wrote the note or where it is. you know, I mean, let's, we can't sugarcoat it, but we can't abuse it, but and misrepresent it, but we also shouldn't sugarcoat it too. We need to be honest. So that's why I think that's why HHS is very important, to be oversight on how the stories unfold, because they are powerful and they can mislead.
It's interesting because I was on, I don't know, Netflix or Prime or one of these streaming services not too long ago, and I came across this movie, and I only saw the trailer, so I can't tell you the whole synopsis of this thing. But the premise was, this family had a dad who was living with Alzheimer's, and they need to hire in additional care. So they hire in this nurse, and she starts caring, but she's, typically not what you would hire. She seems great on the outside, but actually she's trying to take his money. She's abusing him. She's torturing him, all these kind of things. And he goes and he's explaining these things are happening, and she goes, no, it's not. And they don't believe him, because they say, it's not a lucid moment. We're not listening to you. So they believe her, which is, oh no, it hasn't happened. So I see these things come up, and I'm like, it was kind of almost a horror movie, but that's not appropriately addressing the stigma when, in Hollywood, it's oftentimes glossed over or used as a MacGuffin for some plot narrative, instead of, something that millions of people actually go through. That's a real legitimate cognitive impairment that we need to tread appropriately on. I think that, in the case of this movie, it's just a plot construct that ultimately causes more damage than it does good. So when you mention this organization that comes in and, supports them,
Hmm.
they obviously missed that film set.
They obviously did. And I wonder when that was made, and
It was
and
within
what.
the last 5 or 6 years.
It probably isn't, was maybe an independent film that they, wasn't in their radar, or on their radar rather, because they deal with probably more studio things and, you know, streaming television, those kinds of things, more premium, because that's where they're, it's Hollywood. Health Society. Listen, it's not perfect for sure. I mean, if I could, besides my own short film, which I'm very proud of, there's an older movie. I think it was from the maybe late '90s, early 2000s, called Away from Her, which I highly recommend. It is beautiful. It is authentic. It is so perfect. It's a perfect movie about Alzheimer's and a husband and wife who navigate it so beautifully and tenderly, and it's just lovely. So if your listeners want to watch a film that it won't make you sad, but it will give you the real perspective, into people that loved each other and always will. So anyway, I love that movie, Away from Her, and yeah, I think that I feel hopeful. I
Yeah.
feel very hopeful.
Hmm. I think The Notebook also, I don't like the sappy romantic part, but I think Notebook does a good job of talking
I
about,
loved
the
it.
real world experience of caring for someone. Who do you care for? And then what happens in long-term care? I mean, after her lucidity falls off after the dance, and then calling darling, their approach is to medicate her, right? Instead of
Right.
caring for her where she's at. So I think that there's things like that. So I think, Susie, there are these gold moments that
Totally.
do.
Yeah, I love The Notebook, by the way. My daughter and I cried our eyes out we could not stop crying. It is the biggest tearjerker. It is a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story. And I think I like it. I loved it. And I think they're very, very similar. Uh, Not quite as sappy as you said, but Away from Her has, it has nice gifts to take away with you. So if you don't want to cry a lot, watch Away from Her. If you like to have a good cry, The Notebook is, you will cry. Did you cry?
I did not cry.
You did not cry. You're so tender, though. You're so sensitive.
I did not cry. It was not. It
You
was
did not
not on
cry.
the bucket list to cry for that movie.
Oh, okay. All right. All right, Macho
But I mean, I
Man.
only saw it 6 months ago for the first time. So
Okay, well, but you're a little bit, you know more about it now.
I knew the whole plot of the movie before I got into it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think us, that didn't know anything about it. It was took you by surprise.
Oh, I'm sure
But
it did.
that movie did a good service because it showed a real situation, and the different perspectives of it from all sides, and that was beautiful. That was good. Well
It was
done.
extra tense because Gina Rowland's mom lived with Alzheimer's before. So she
Uh-huh.
was acting through what she was experiencing from her mom. And then she ended up having Alzheimer's down the road. So it's it's
Life imitating art. Yep.
an interesting dynamic. We did a 60 for 60 episode specifically on her and this whole dynamic. And it's wild.
It is. It's brutal too, in a way.
Totally.
It was interesting when I was directing Valerie Harper in my film. She doesn't have Alzheimer's or dementia. However, she had been diagnosed with brain cancer 7 years before that we started working together. And she was given a death sentence, 6 months to live. And she was a pistol like my mom. So she was like, I'm not going to my funeral before I'm ready. I'm going to live. Right. So when she read my script, she fell in love with it and she had to do it. And, the medication that she was taking during that time, it manifested very much like dementia when she was on it. So I didn't realize it because when we were in rehearsal, she always had her script. The first day on the set, she could not remember her lines. And so I had a bus full of extras. We were in a bus. It was the first thing we were shooting. And she was adorable, like my mom, because she could just, make a joke about it. Like, she's not forgetting anything. She just knew how to, make it funny. And it's like, of course I remember you because you are so beautiful. Right. So she just make up stuff like my mom did. Um, and lucky for me and lucky for her, I knew how to deal with with what was going on with my mom at the time. So I had no problem directing her. And I found it's like the irony of it is here I am getting her to know her lines and she can't remember. And I wanted to do it with dignity for her. So I didn't embarrass her and make her feel less than. So it was like, again, life imitating art. And I think not to pat myself on the back, it just was the way it turned out and probably wasn't an accident, but I was the best director she could have had because I had empathy and compassion for what she was going through.
That's amazing. And it was her last film role as
Last
well, right?
performance. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Susie, well, let's shift to lightning round. You ready?
Yep.
All
Bring it.
right. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Decaf or calf?
Calf all the way leaded, even at night.
No, Susie. No.
Face.
No.
I have a lot to do. I have a lot to do right now. I know. That's why I look so tired. I actually look really tired right now, but
No.
this year is going to be a tough one for me with this walk. Go on.
Yeah. You'll make it through. You'll do a marathon soon. We'll just scale it up and then
All right.
and then an Alzheimer's marathon for Roar.
Yeah. Just a side note, the last film that I just wrote that's going to be out later this year is called Run. And it's all about this woman running a marathon while she's running away from some, demons that she's got going on. So I had to learn all about marathons because I had to, she's running the New Jersey Marathon. So I know all about it. I know how
So
to do it from
when does that drop?
literally.
When's the movie drop?
I don't know exactly when it drops. It's dropping this year because I know because I was attached to direct, and that's a whole other story. We'll another time. But yeah, because I know because when they send in the whatever when you know that when you get the announcement that you got your credit and blah 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 and you get a bonus, then I know, oh, okay, it's going into production. I mean, it's going to be released soon this year, so I'll find out. But when it does, I'll let you know.
Yeah, let me know. We'll
Yeah.
throw the link down below once that happens. We can update it
Of
down below
course,
after.
yeah. Something,
All
and
right.
it's not about Alzheimer's.
That's about running. So it's still, we talk about that thing in this space all the time. Running
Good.
and Alzheimer's. It's kind of the two worlds we live in.
Well, it's a dramedy, so I hope you get laughs because I really immersed myself into that world of running so I could really understand it. So yeah.
Now you're planning a run.
Yes, I want to do it. I actually do. But I am very athletic, by the way, but running is a challenge. I'll have to really, it's hard. 26.2
A
miles.
marathon is all mental. After the halfway mark, it's all mental.
Yeah.
All mental.
Yeah.
Morning person or night owl?
Night owl. Thus the caffeine at night. Hate the morning.
What's your favorite Hollywood moment you've had so far?
That's too hard. I'm looking in my office. There's Peter Falk. I got to do a co-star on his on Columbo, which was so fun. And Peter was just a doll, and he had an affinity towards me, and he said he'd go, Susie, come have some spaghetti with me for lunch. And I go, really? He goes, don't eat that crap over there. Come with me. And so he and then I said, before we wrapped, he signed my script, and I'm looking at it because it's framed, and it says, Susie, that's your name. It ain't fancy, but it's yours. He goes, you're lovely. You're a lovely girl. And also very nice. And I love you, Peter Falk. So that was a treasure moment for sure, because he's beloved. He's a beloved, and I really enjoyed working with him.
What is one word in dementia care you wish would disappear?
Demented.
What is one word caregivers should use more?
Yes.
If you
Yes.
were to make a movie about your life story, other than the one that was made, who would play you? And we know Verily Harper would play your mom if she was alive. Who
What
would play you?
age? What age are we talking
I don't
about?
know. Your life story.
Well,
You make the call.
I would say Kate Hudson.
Oh, that would be good.
Because, yeah, I think because she's got the same heart as me. She's got the same, she's ballsy and she's funny and she's blonde and she likes to work out and she loves her children and she loves her mom. And I just feel simpatico with her. And I think she's a great actress.
I would agree. What does Hollywood get right about aging?
Sadly, not enough. Sadly, not enough. Like all those movies with Jane Fonda and Sally Field and Lily Tomlin, they're so not authentic. They're so cartoon. I think they need it. I mean, I think like, I'm trying to think with Olivia Jacob, what was the Olympic Dukakis? What was that movie with, this was back in I mean, there's been a few movies that have been really good where they treat women and men of a certain age, authentic. You don't just become a different species when you, you know, like suddenly you're dumb. Suddenly you like, oh, everybody smokes pot for the first time when they're older and have like a trip,
Yeah.
like they didn't have a past before, like they didn't live a life, that's, and
Yeah.
so it's just, yeah, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Yeah. I just want to see more because people of an age have so much to give and have so much knowledge and lived life. They're just like so much to give back, and we don't cash in on it.
What is one small thing that helps more than people expect?
Leaning in to where your person is at, whatever, like you do with your children. Lean in wherever they're at in their cognitive uh, abilities. Lean into it and have the most compassion that you can, and try to understand where they're coming from, and then you will mitigate your anxiety and their anxiety, and it's loving and it's respectful and it works.
What show or movie helps you reset on a hard day?
Ugh. Well, that's also a hard one because I binge. There's so I don't just go. There's not one that's just running all the time. I mean, okay, let's see. I mean, if you want to talk about an old show that is that always delivers, that if you're trying to go to sleep and you have insomnia, I mean, turn on Friends. You can't lose with Friends. It's
I
just
knew
like
you were going to say that.
you did.
I just had a
How?
feeling. I just had a feeling.
Because it's kind of like it's comfy. It's comfy. You know the characters. You know who they are. It still tracks, and it's good, and it's just comfort. It's comfort food. Yeah.
What does dignity mean to you in one word?
Value. Value.
What is one thing you'll never stop being curious about?
Why we're here. What is the purpose? And where are we going? There's two.
Well, I'll accept it. What gives you hope?
People who surprise me with their heart. their kindness.
What is the most human thing that has happened to you lately?
It's the most recent one. So getting a beautiful letter from one of our walk leaders from the walk that said, I wrote a letter and said, I'm to everybody, because we lost a couple leaders, and I said, I just wanted to share with you that I feel a little sad and I have a lump in my throat, and I know that it's really difficult, but you know, I when I think about people that are in the same situation as my mom was right now, as I write this, I have the same lump in my throat. And so I will not stop, and I will be here to, as best I can, to guide us through. And anyway, I got the letters back. I got many letters back, but most, and they said, you are the right person. We got you. We're here. We're not leaving. And that was like so reassuring and reaffirming, and I needed it. I needed to hear it.
Hmm. So, Susie, I always leave the guests with the opportunity to have the last word and say whatever they want as parting to the audience. So, what would you have to say to the folks?
Oh my God, you ask hard questions. That's like,
I thought
that's
that
like
was an easy one. All the lightning were harder than that.
no. Oh, I think, well, because listen, I mean, just enjoy your life. Just be kind and loving and understanding, and don't use people and abuse people, and just be nice. Be nice to each other. If you think someone is a good person, tell them. If you think a woman looks gorgeous today, tell her that. My mom used to do that. She'd stop a gorgeous looking woman. My mom was 5 foot tall, and she'd go, "You are gorgeous." And the woman was like taken aback, like, "What, me?" And she's like, "Yeah, yes, you." And because people don't tell each other enough. They don't, and I'm not saying that looks are everything. I'm just saying, if someone does a great job, if they cook something good, tell them. Like, just let people know that they're appreciated. Be nice. It's better. It's a better thing. That's all.
Kind words and affirmation can go a long way.
A long way. It's a ripple.
100%. Well,
Yeah.
Susie, thank you so much for joining us. I really
My
appreciate your
pleasure.
time and bringing so much valuable insight to the show today. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And to our listeners, thank you as well for being here. If today's conversation resonated with you, make sure to follow the Dementia Collective wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget the power of like, commenting, and sharing. And if you'd like to help us grow this movement, please consider becoming a member of the Village on Patreon. Among the benefits, like the ability to ask Among the benefits, like the ability to ask questions to our guests, you get early access to every episode, plus the satisfaction of helping powerful voices like Susie's reach more caregivers around the world. And finally, if you're on your own caregiving journey, remember, you are not alone. We're here at BlueBell to help connect you with the supports and resources that truly fit your family's unique needs. Until next time, remember, you are strong, you are not alone, and you're doing something that matters more than you know. I'll see you then.